Hey guys, Yips here, coming at you with another video, and this is going to be an insight/discussion guide for the Destro Warlock. I spent a lot of time yesterday trying to make a full-fledged guide, however it wasn't working out the way that I wanted it to. Felt like I was repeating a lot of old content, felt super boring, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to include a link in the description to a video I had made previously about Destro, talking about talent options, talking about rotational stuff. Not too much has changed since I made that video, so go check it out if you're curious on those topics. However, in this video, I will be discussing my insights on the spec. I'll talk about some Azerite traits that I find interesting. I'll talk about its role in raids, as well as why it's so powerful as a spec. I'll talk about moving into the next raid tier, where I see Destro and how I see it working on the bosses in the next raid tier. So hopefully you'll find these topics interesting. I think it'll be much more interesting to talk about and a much better video. So Destro obviously is an extremely powerful raid spec right now. It is by far the best progression spec for Aldir that Warlock currently has, and possibly one of the best progression specs in the game for Aldir. Destro has so many good tools for this raid because over half the bosses are just priority cleave bosses. Priority cleave bosses are simply bosses that spawn adds that need to be killed in a very quick period of time. Think things like Feta Devour on Mythic difficulty. The Corruption Corpuscles, if they do not die quickly, they heal, and they'll also heal the boss. Destro is excellent. It gets to focus two of them down at the same time with the Havoc ability, so whenever those spawn, you're just Havocing, you're putting your dots out, and you're able to cast a few Chaos Bolts in and do a ton of effective damage to both of them. Not a lot of classes are very good at doing that, but Destro is king. We have cooldowns like Infernal and Dark Soul to help us with vulnerability phases, so think like Gehun, the 100% damage vulnerability. Destro is able to put out a ton of DPS. On Mithrax, whenever that ad spawns, Destro is able to pump a ton of damage because you'll have your Havoc cooldown off. A lot of the time you'll either have your Infernals or your Dark Soul cooldown to cleave. It is just an amazing spec for Aldir because of the unique toolkit that it brings to the Warlock spec. So that being said, Destro currently is my favorite spec to play in the raid. It's very easy to see your effectiveness on a lot of boss fights, which I think is excellent. It's always nice at the end of the fight when you can see yourself, even if you're not at the top of the meter, you know you were the most effective DPS class on that fight because of what you brought the raid in terms of utility. Moving forward into the next raid tier, Destro is also going to be very strong on a lot of the bosses. It might take some time to get some gear to be effective. I'll talk about that in a little bit. However, a lot of the bosses are really similar to how Aldir played out. They spawn adds that need to die. However, they do spawn more adds than they did, I believe, in Aldir, so that's why Affliction might be a little bit better, considering that it does have the ability to multi-target cleave slightly better than Destro does. However, 2 to 3 target fights, at least 2 consistent target fights, Destro still is king at. It is amazingly strong with the Infernals, with the Havoc windows that we have. So look forward to a lot of the boss fights. A lot of them are council fights that spawn adds. Destro will definitely be very, very, very powerful at those fights. So look forward, if you are a Destro Warlock, to see similar success to what you had in Aldir. Grog is a 2-target fight. Jade Masters is a 2-target fight. Conclave of the Chosen is a 2-target fight. King Rastakhan, I believe, is a 2-target fight as well, and there's some cool things that we can do on the last 2 bosses to make Destro even more powerful. So Destro, obviously looking up for the next 2 raid tiers, it's definitely going to be very powerful. However, there are some really cool things that I want to talk about that are baked within the spec that we can look to abuse in raid and in the next raid tier. So obviously, one of the most abusable things Destro currently has as a spec is Flashpoint. Now, if you haven't really looked too much into the spec and only looked at sims, you will notice that Flashpoint isn't very high up on the sim list. It's in the middle of the pack in terms of damage per effective talent. However, that is assuming that you only have Flashpoint for the first 80% of, for the first 20% of the boss's health pool, otherwise you'll lose the buff. But on a lot of fights, either adds will spawn, people will get mind controlled, and you can dot them with your Immolate and gain this buff back. And in next raid tier, you're going to be able to have 3 of these flashpoints because we're going to be able to dump the archive trait. And when you have 3 flashpoint talents, we're going to be able to accumulate over 2,000 haste when this thing procs. Not only that, but we're going to be able to pair it with other traits as well, which makes it even more powerful than it currently is. So you can be running a build where you have triple Flashpoint, triple Cap Crash, and Chaos, do a ton of damage with Infernals, have that insane haste up for that Infernal cooldown and your Crashing Chaoses, but not only that, for the rest of the fight, if you're able to consistently proc this, you'll just be playing with 2,000 extra haste, which is absolutely insane. If you think about Reorigination Array, it's about a 1.5 to 2k DPS increase depending on the class that you're playing. That's 750 stat. Consistently having over 2,000 stat is an insane damage boost, and there's so many fights where you're going to be able to abuse this. Right now on Mithrax, I think my highest flashpoint uptime with 2 traits was like 75%. That's insane. I was playing with over 1,200 additional haste for 75% of the encounter, and it is the most abusable tool and the most abusable Azerite trait that currently exists for Warlock. The power level of this thing, when used in the right conditions, is out of this world. So if you have the trait, I do recommend you even try it on the training dummies. Training dummies don't lose HP, at least down here, so you're going to be at full stacks the entire time, and you're just going to be playing with just an insane amount of haste, and it's super, super fun to do as well. I really, really like this. Another obviously very powerful trait for the Destro Warlock is going to be the Crashing Chaos, just bolstering your burst damage. Although you do have to be careful with this trait, because a lot of the time in raid, this trait will yield the most DPS results as a whole. You'll do the most damage overall with this trait throughout the course of a boss fight, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best trait for that particular boss. So it's a little bit of a trap trait. Sometimes it can be very good, obviously, if it's just a flat, boss that just needs to take a lot of damage, sure, it can be good, but if it's a fight that consistently needs damage output on multiple targets, it loses a lot of value because you're not going to have it up every single time an ad spawns, and that ad might be equal priority every single time. So you might be better off running traits that just increase your damage at a flat rate, such as the one that increases your Chaos Bolt damage or your shards, things of that nature. So Destro has a lot of interesting things and different choices that it can make depending on the boss fight that may not yield the most damage results, but may be the most effective for your raid as a whole. So you really need to take that into consideration when you're gearing your Destro Warlock, in particular gearing for the Azerite traits. Now, I had mentioned earlier that Destro might not be as good at the very start of the next raid release. And that is because Destro is fairly a trait-specific spec. It wants certain traits. If it doesn't have them, it does not perform as well. And the issue is, when we go into next raid tier, all of the Azerite gear that we're using right now is going to be severely underpowered because we're going to be going in and getting 2 traits instead of 1, so literally doubling the amount of tier 1 traits that we have. And Destro's requires you to have like Crashing Chaos. It requires you to have things like Flashpoint, Chaos Shards, and Chaotic Infernal and Bursting Flare. They're all right traits, but they're definitely not the best and definitely not going to give you the most effectiveness. Whereas a class like Affliction can really use any trait and shine on particular bosses. So when we're going to the next raid tier, at least early on, if you're rolling random Azerite pieces, you're kind of leaving it up to chance on your Destro lock whether or not you're going to get these good traits, whether or not you're going to get the Flashpoints, the Crashing Chaoses, the things that really make Destro shine. Whereas if you're playing a spec like Affliction, or even to a point Demonology, however Demo does have the requirement that you need at least 1 Baleful Invocation trait, you're going to have a lot easier of a time rolling those random pieces because any sort of thing that you get is usable and won't hurt your damage too much overall. So those are the things that I have to think about Destro right now. It is an extremely strong spec in the current meta. It is going to be extremely strong in the next raid tier as well. It's nice because all of the stat weights are fairly normalized. If you guys want me to talk about anything else in depth on the Destro Warlock, feel free to mention it in the comment section below. I'll be glad to discuss it if you feel like I missed something in this video. Or if you're really needing that Destro guide and you feel like the content that I had made previously is out of date, let me know and I will do my best to make that video interesting and make it feel like something rewarding. So thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed these insights as Destro Warlock moving into the next raid tier, and I will talk to you guys later.